Hello again, and welcome to episode number 3 of the Private Pilot podcast by Private Pilot Steve. And in this trip is a little bit longer than my normal trip. I went from Gulf Shores over to Charleston, South Carolina, and this was recorded on October 25th, 2012. And if you're looking at the video, you can see that I'm up fairly high today, trying to catch some tailwinds, but there weren't many because there was a little storm coming up the East Coast named Sandy. And at this time, it was still out over Florida along the Atlantic and starting its way towards the north. Um, and although I was flying into Charleston, I was glad it stayed offshore and didn't really give me any trouble there. Although on Saturday it rained pretty good and was overcast. And the reason why I went to Charleston was for flight training. So needless to say, I got a lot of ground school, but I didn't get any time in the air, which is okay. I don't like to fly when I'm rushed or when the weather's bad during training because I like to stop and talk about things and see if the instructor has any critique that he wants to give me. But getting back to the flight here, as you can see, I'm up high. I'm at 15,000 feet today. And since I'm flying higher, and I normally do that on my longer legs, especially traveling west to east, where I'm more apt to have a good tailwind, I thought it'd be a good time to discuss the oxygen system in the airplane and kind of let you know a little bit more about breathing oxygen in a small airplane. And as you know, our airplanes are not pressurized. And although they're not pressurized, my particular aircraft has a turbocharged engine, so I have a theoretical ceiling limit of 25,000 feet in which the aircraft can perform and do what it needs to do. Unfortunately, humans can't go that high without oxygen. And so a lot of the newer airplanes like the Cirrus and my Corvallis have some type of built-in oxygen system. And what we do is we breathe oxygen through a cannulus. And you've probably seen those around the hospitals and seen people wearing them, people that have breathing problems. And I have about, I would say 5 or 6 hours of oxygen on board. The tanks are built into the wing. You can't see them. And there's a filler in the back of the airplane in the luggage compartment. And most FBOs have pressurized oxygen tanks, and they can refill that for me. But anyhow, I breathe the oxygen through the cannulus, and that's good up through 18,000 feet. Over 18,000 feet, there's not enough ambient pressure just of the normal cannula system, so you're required to wear a full mask that can pressurize your face, so to speak, so that you can get enough oxygen. And the mask has a built-in microphone, so naturally you have to talk to FAA while you're flying to air traffic control. So the mask has the built-in microphone, but it's not very comfortable, and it sounds horrible. And for that reason, I very, very seldom fly above 15,000 feet or 18,000 feet because it's not worth the trouble. And I don't usually fly more than about 2.5, 3 hour legs when I fly somewhere. So I'm just not going to go through the trouble of getting up that high and putting on the special mask and all that. So I wear a cannulus. And I have a real neat little setup, and I have to take some pictures of it and put it in a future podcast. But I have a little swing down cannulus arm on my headset, and it swings down and goes under my nose, and then I can plug the hose or the tubing that's connected to it into the oxygen system, and That way I don't have a lot of things around my neck or going behind my head or have to put anything over my head. It's just very, very, very easy. Now my passengers have to wear the cannulas. And just basically the rules for oxygen are anytime you're over 12,500 feet, the pilot has to have oxygen. And over 14,000 feet, the pilot and all the passengers have to have oxygen. And so I have a 4-place oxygen system. And if I have a full airplane, which is very, very seldom because I normally don't carry more than 3 people because of weight limitations, then I have oxygen that I can supply everybody. One rule of thumb that has gotten pretty popular is that over 10,000 feet during the day, we probably should breathe oxygen. And over 8,000 feet at night, it's probably a good idea to breathe oxygen. The first thing to go is your eyesight. And so at night, you want to be sure you have plenty of oxygen so you can keep your night vision. And that's kind of a brief explanation of oxygen on board a small airplane. It's not very complicated. Just on the G1000 display, there's a special systems page that shows the oxygen pressure, so you can tell when you're starting to get low. And there's an on-off button that turns oxygen on and off. The only problem is if you forget to turn the oxygen off and land the aircraft and power everything down and leave, it's going to all leak out in about a couple hours or so. So I've gotten pretty good at remembering to turn the oxygen off because the cost to fill the oxygen system normally range from $75 to $125. So that gives you a pretty good reminder of turning the oxygen system off. All right, let's get back to the flight here. And at some point, ATC is going to start me down. The weather was forecast to be clear the whole way, but as we got close to Charleston, you can see some little cloud layers starting to form. And I'm not sure any of this was actually associated with Hurricane Sandy or not. Probably a little bit from the very, very outskirts. And as a matter of fact, as I got lower, I actually wound up having a headwind. And I'm sure that's from that low being centered south of us, southeast of us, and we were getting the very, very top of the flow from that thing. And that's why we had a wind from the east, which normally the winds are from the west. But I'm being vectored around by ATC, and as I got closer to Charleston, the buildup started getting a little bit stronger, and it kind of surprised me. And I actually went through a couple. And when you're out here flying around, and I'm flying IFR, which means I'm on a flight plan, and I have a route that I'm assigned, and I'm supposed to stay on that route. And usually I can deviate a few degrees one way or the other without having to say anything to ATC. If I'm going to deviate more than about 5 to 10 degrees, I'll call them up and just ask for permission to deviate. And very, very seldom do they not give it to you, so it's not a big deal. But if I have buildups in front of me and to the sides of them, then it's clear and I only have to turn a couple degrees, then I'll usually just do that so I don't have to go through the buildup. But today when I was coming in, I had a few of them, and a lot of times if they don't look too bad and I can see the tops of them, that's kind of my rule. I don't fly through any buildups I can't see the top of. Which means if I look up and that thing goes up forever, I'm not going through it. But if I can see the top, then, and I know that I'm going to pop out the other side fairly quick, then I'll usually just go ahead and go through them to kind of get a feel for what the weather is like. If I go through a small buildup or a small, cumulus cloud that's starting to build and go through it, I'll usually be able to tell how much water's in there and what kind of bumps are in there. And by going through a small one like that, then I know what I'm in for the rest of the flight. whether or not I want to deviate completely around the thing, get lower, or do something different. And I did go through one here, and it had a lot more energy in it than I thought it would. I mean, the surrounding area outside of the cloud was perfectly still, calm. The airplane is just rock solid, just like you're sitting still. But when I went through the cloud, it did get pretty bumpy, and it got dark, and it got wet. And so that gives you an indication that the storms are building, and there is a lot of energy in the atmosphere, and to probably steer clear of them. And so that's pretty much what I did for the rest of the flight, and which wasn't that much longer because I was already in the Charleston area when I got down into them. But like I say, it gave me an indication to know that I don't want to go through anything that looks larger than what I just went through, and I sure don't want to go through anything that I can't see the other side of or see the top of, and just try to stay safe that way. And my wife was flying with me, and she doesn't like to be inside a cloud. I don't know if it's a claustrophobic thing or what, but probably because she's not flying the airplane. And when you are flying the airplane, you just do feel like you have a little bit more control than if you're just a passenger along for the ride. Okay, and now, as you can see, I'm getting my final vectors to get turned into the airport for landing. So I was able to get below the clouds at this point, and I could see the airport fairly well. And they had me pretty much lined up straight in for the runway. And when I was looking at the chart originally for this airport, they have two main runways, very long, because Charleston also is home to an Air Force base, Charleston Air Force Base. It's kind of unusual that it shares a commercial airport with the Air Force Base. And I was trying to pick what runway I was going to be on. We always look at the winds before we land and before we get close. Listen to what's called ATIS or AWAS, which is a radio service that tells us the weather at the airport. And I always try to anticipate what runway I might be getting, get ready for it. Well, somehow I missed in the NOTAMs, and NOTAMs are a special section when we get a briefing that tells us anything unusual about the airport or the frequencies or en route, anything that's not normally noted. And this airport has one of its runways closed. And somehow I missed that on my printed briefing. After I landed and got down and had time to go back and look, I found where it was. It was pretty far down, buried kind of in the notes. Most of these airports have lots of notes about, taxiways closed or obstructions, towers out around the ends of the runway where maybe they're building something, or just all kinds of stuff. And it's just, a lot of reading. But somehow I missed this note that the runway was closed. And so I thought sure I was going to get one runway, and then of course when they gave me my information, they assigned a different runway, which was the shorter of the two, although it was still very long. It was over 7,000 feet. So like I say, they do have long runways in Charleston. And so I went ahead and got lined up and got ready for this runway. And you'll see here in a little bit when I land that not only is that other runway closed, but it's really closed. It's got construction on it. It's got barricades. It's got cones. There's no way you're going to land on that by accident. But I'm coming in here, and I don't like to be rushed, but I had a passenger jet to the right waiting for the runway, and had a large Air Force transport jet, probably a C-5 or a C-17. I don't know what the designations are for the large four-engine transport planes that they use, but it was big. And of course, they're both sitting there at the end of the runway burning fuel, but having to wait for me. Landing traffic has the priority, so they're going to hold those two guys. So I was trying to just make a straight-in approach and keep my speed up the best I could so I could go ahead and get down. It's always courteous to try to get down and get out the way. They're burning a lot more fuel than I am. So I'm making everything I can do here to keep my speed up. There is also pretty good crosswinds, and in a crosswind you like to keep your speed up also. So it just kind of all worked out. And you'll see here coming up during the landing, you can see the transport plane on my left. You won't be able to see the other plane on the other side. And I also have one landing in front of me, and so the controller will give you a caution of wake turbulence. It was some kind of passenger plane, probably a MD-88 or a 737, something like that, which I'm landing fairly close behind. And they'll give you a caution for wake turbulence because the large aircraft, until they touch down, they have vortices that come off the ends of the wings. They're like horizontal tornadoes, and you don't want to get into one of those. It can turn you upside down in a flash. So the rule of thumb is just try to land a little bit longer than normal, because once that plane touches down, then those vortices are gone. And on a day like today, when you got a pretty good crosswind, that's also going to blow those vortices off the runway fairly quick. So on a calm day is when you have to kind of be careful, because those things will just sit out there for a while. But I wasn't worried at all about any wake turbulence today. So I'm just going to try to get down and get out of these folks' way. And coming up here, you can see the plane's bouncing around pretty good, and that shows you that there's some crosswind. And there's that big transport plane waiting to take the runway. And once I got down here, I was waiting for the controller to tell me to get off the runway in a hurry, and I really didn't hear much from him. But I went ahead and tried to get the speed down as quick as I could. Use a little braking, which I normally don't like to do, but I know if I'm going to roll all the way out to the end of this runway, I'm sure going to get shouted at by somebody. So I want to go ahead and get stopped. And there's a high-speed taxiway and coming up. And just a high-speed taxiway means that instead of the taxiway turning at a 90-degree angle, it's usually at a 45-degree angle. So you can make your turn a little bit quicker than normal and get on off. And so I went ahead and got off on the first taxiway I could see there. And about the time I was starting to turn off, they went ahead and told me to contact ground and turn on that taxiway, which I did. And talked to ground, and then ground will let you go on across. They give you the taxi instructions to go on into the FBO. And from here on, it was just a normal, routine landing and arrival in Charleston. And by the way, we had a great time in Charleston. It's a great city, and I'm looking forward to going back soon. And now here we are on our return trip from Charleston, heading back to Jack Edwards and Gulf Shores. And I was already airborne and leveled off and just saw some really interesting river area here. I'm not sure where this is. It could be in Georgia, just North Georgia, between the Georgia and South Carolina border somewhere. And as you can see, the weather today is severe clear. And this is after Hurricane Sandy has already moved up into the New York area and is causing a lot of havoc today in New York. But as you can see, the area south of there is very, very clear. And I happen to spot this one area here where you can see there's something burning on the ground. It's probably some kind of controlled burn. But I wanted to point it out because as we're flying around, and sometimes you want to know what the winds are on the ground, the easiest way is to look for some kind of smoke, either from a fire like this or industrial complex. And just by looking down, you can very easily tell the wind direction and the wind speed. And I'm traveling pretty much southwest bound, so you can see the wind's probably pretty much out of the west down there. And it's blowing at a pretty good clip, because if there's no wind, that smoke will rise straight up, and it'll usually come up to 8,000 or 9,000 feet where it hits some kind of layer and then spreads out. And today it's spreading out real fast on the ground, so you can see it's going to be a bumpy landing down there. And this is pretty much behind that cold front that has come through. So usually behind these cold fronts, the weather's beautiful. It's clear as can be, but below about 3,000 feet, it gets pretty bumpy. And now I'm further down, getting ready to come across the coast here. This is one of the military airports. I'm not sure if it's Fort Whiting, but it's in that area, Destin, Fort Walton area. And there are several different military airports down in this area. And we're just coming across, probably talking to Cairns Approach in this area, which is a military approach control facility that also controls civilian aircraft in their airspace. And not that far from home, maybe about 30 or 40 minutes. So just to give you a good idea of what one of the larger military airports looks like from the air. And it was such a pretty day today. As you can see, it's pretty clear out, not a lot of haze, so the visibility was great. And that's the way it usually is when these cold fronts come through in the fall and the winter time, and even the springtime. Summer, the haze layer gets pretty bad. Sometimes you can't see the ground. It'd be like an IFR day. But today was really a pretty day. And probably talking to Pensacola Approach by this time, and they're getting me down. I came over at 9,000 feet. And they're slowly working me down. I'm probably down to about 5,000 here. And here you'll see, this is Pensacola Bay. And I'm just above the Pensacola Airport. You can't see it below me, but I'm pretty much right on top of it. And that's the bridge that goes from downtown Pensacola over to Pensacola Beach. And like I say, it is a beautiful day. Got to look out the window, which is nice sometimes. We always don't get to look out and see the ground. But it was really just a nice trip coming up the coast. You can see the barrier islands out there and the Bay Area, and then the start of the Intercoastal Waterway. And like I say, there's quite a bit of military traffic up in this area. Here you can see the Pensacola Naval Air Station coming up at the top of the screen. It's right there where the pass comes in. That's about the only place you can get in with a boat for several miles, one way or the other. And the Navy has that really nice air station there. And they also have the Naval Air Museum, which is probably one of the best kept secrets in the country. It's quite a facility. Has a lot of airplanes. If you're ever in the Gulf Coast area, take time to go over and spend at least a day at the Pensacola Air Museum. There's no charge to get in, and the planes on display and all the memorabilia and everything that's there will really amaze you. The Navy has done just a wonderful job of preserving a lot of the older airplanes and displaying them with good explanations. And, there's an upstairs area that you can go up, and they have a lot of just plaques and informational material and all on the walls. If you really want to see the whole museum and read everything and spend a lot of time there, it'd probably take 3 or 4 days to go through, but it's well worth it. And now we're passing the Naval Air Museum and Naval Air Station area. The museum is pretty close to the airport area there, so a lot of people will go to the museum on Tuesdays and Wednesday mornings during the times that the Blue Angels are in town, and they practice on those mornings, usually around 8 o'clock, and you can park in the back parking lot of the Naval Air Museum, and it's quite a show. You get to see it, and those guys do a good job. Kind of sped it up here, save a little bit of time. coming up on the Perdido Key area, and that's Perdido Key out there, the furthest barrier island, and behind Perdido Key is an island called Ono Island, which is in Alabama. Perdido Key is in Florida. It's kind of unique. The state line kind of wraps around Ono Island on the east end, so you can come across about a quarter mile of water and go from Florida to Alabama very quickly. And now we're coming up on what's called Perdido Pass, which is in Orange Beach, Alabama. And this is another area where you can go in and out to the Gulf. And it's a pretty popular area for the fishermen to go out of Orange Beach. And we're gaining on the airport here. As you can see, my altitude is getting down. I've probably canceled with Pensacola. What canceling means is that I have the airport in sight, and I don't need their services any longer, so I cancel with them. And then I'm kind of on my own. I switch to the local frequency of the airport and call traffic, let everybody know where I'm at, and listen for where everybody else is at. And you can see I'm passing north of the airport here, westbound, and listening for traffic and trying to kind of get my place in the traffic if there is any. And I don't remember if there was. I don't think it was very busy coming back today. But the wind was pretty brisk out of the north. When I hit 3,000 feet, I was bouncing around pretty good. You can see the plane kind of rocking here. So the shorter runway, 3.5, which is the north runway, is probably a better pick today with a brisk north wind. I think the winds were around 15, gusting to 25 out of the north. So I decided to use runway 3.5. And now I'm making my left downwind for 3.5. And pattern altitude at this airport's around 1,000 feet. So at this point, try to get to 1,000 feet, get slowed up for the first notch of flaps, which is 127 knots, and get those on down. And with a north wind like that, it's going to blow me past the airport fairly quick. So when I make my left turn here, the wind is going to be blowing me southbound, so I'll probably have to crab back into the wind to stay where I want to stay. And now I'm turning base, and at this point probably dropping below 1,000 feet, coming up on 500 feet. And at 500 feet I'll put the last notch of flaps in. I have to be below 107 knots for that. And making my last left turn here. This is called final. Calling traffic the whole time, announcing where I'm at, that I'm on a final for runway 3.5. And at this point, just get the airplane stabilized down to 90 knots and lined up with the runway. Now you can kind of feel where the winds are, and if you need to grab the airplane to stay straight onto the runway center line. And although it looks low, I'm not really seeing any of that when I'm flying. I'm looking at the runway straight ahead. And you can see it's pretty bumpy. It's a nice marina here right before you get to the runway. And now you can see the area cleared for the runway, and there's another plane getting ready to take off. After I landed, I let him know it's going to be pretty bumpy when he gets up, because I have a heavy airplane, and it was bouncing me around pretty good. So in that little Cessna, I can imagine those guys wanted to go sightseeing, so I'm sure they're going to get bounced around and have a good time. Well, I'm down, and it's been a great flight, and I appreciate all the listeners. If you have any questions, be sure to get with me, and I'll see you again on the next podcast.